Recording in progress. Very good. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome everybody here and everybody on Zoom to this special meeting with Sister Eliana from Israel. We are in the sanctuary of Fourviere in New Zealand, in Leithfield, and we welcome you wherever you are in your homes, joining us today to hear all about what's happening in the Holy Land, especially with the Beatitudes Community and their work in ecumenism and the Christian-Jewish dialogue. So I'll just hand over to Sister Eliana from Israel. Thank you for coming in, Sister.
Thank you for welcoming back to your place. I mean, unfortunately, not in person, but via Zoom, as this is the way during the COVID times, but here I am. Thank you for answering this Israel Advent appeal as well in advance. And for those who know me, hello. For those who do not know me, I would just like to introduce myself very briefly. I entered the community actually in Leithfield in New Zealand several years ago, and I spent in New Zealand 7 years. And then I was called to go to Toulouse, where I spent about 8 years working as a student chaplain. But during that time, I also got involved with Jewish-Christian relations and ended up going to Israel. And so for this talk, we thought that it would be interesting, since it's a formation time, to give you some formation. Maybe even if you know it, it might be a resume for some of you, but just to give you some ideas on Catholic-Jewish relations in the state of Israel and some theological perspectives that go with that, and also the role that the community of the Beatitudes plays. So, so that you can situate more clearly where we are. And also when you go back to Israel, when finally the borders are open, you will understand the society and the rich mosaic a little bit better. Because very often when we go to Israel, we go through the holy places, obviously, which is very normal, which is obvious. Hello, Jen and Tim. And so we want to participate. We want to make the most of those holy places. We want to be on a retreat, but those holy places are situated in a particular country, in a particular context. And so I would like to just give you a few perspectives on this context, so you can pray for this country a bit better, and also so you can pray for a mission a bit better here. So just also the credit of this talk, I want. Oh no. Okay, so I would like to give a bit of credit for this talk to Father David Neuhaus, who works for the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, and who gave me some of his notes to help you give you this talk as well. So it is important to note that it is only the church in Israel, out of all the churches in the Middle East, which has an important and living relationship with Jews. Whereas there are small Jewish minorities in Turkey and Iran, or the Jewish communities of Iraq, Syria, or Lebanon, and Egypt, they all but vanished over the past 60 years. So Jewish-Catholic relations are central to the life of the Universal Catholic Church in the past half century. However, the particular circumstances of the Middle East create certain obstacles to relations between Jews and Catholics that need to be considered when we're talking about the concrete reality of the contemporary Middle East. So that means that only this Jewish-Christian dialogue at the moment really happens here in Israel. So before we plunge into our subject, I would like to briefly define who we are talking about when we say Jews and Christians in the state of Israel. The state of Israel is a political reality established in 1948 with recognized borders. For the first time since the beginning of Christianity, Jews became a sovereign majority in a particular territory in which there was a Christian minority. Christians are just over 2% of population of the state of Israel here. So very different situation to Europe, North America, or Australia, Oceania. As for the Jews, they're very heterogeneous. There are believing, practicing Jews, non-believing, non-practicing Jews, and many varieties in between. Well known is the division of religious Jews, ultra-Orthodox, modern Orthodox, traditional, conservative, Reform, etc. And as important for understanding Jewish life in Israel are the diverse backgrounds from which these communities come, and they come from North America, South America, Central Europe, also Ethiopia, etc. And the places from which they come will affect the way they perceive Christians as well. So Jewish Israeli society is still in formation, and this does not always facilitate relations with those defined as outsiders, which is, for example, me or you when you come. What seems to provide for the unity of the Jewish people today are two historical factors. So the experience of anti-Semitism culminating in the Shoah Holocaust, and the modern sense of the state of Israel, both central themes in relations between Jews and Catholics. So I will elaborate this later further. Catholics in both Israel and Palestine are a small statistical minority. They form part of a very heterogeneous Christian population made up of Orthodox, Catholic, Eastern and Roman Catholics, Eastern non-Chalcedonians, which means Armenians, Syrians, and Copts, Protestants and evangelicals, as well as Messianic Jews. And the largest groups of Catholics is the Greek Byzantine Rite Catholics, followed by the Latins, as Roman Catholics, followed by the Maronites, with the small groups of Syrian and Armenian Catholics as well. Today, confessional divisions are less important in understanding Christian identity than social, political, and cultural factors that define attitudes and behaviors. And here I would like to distinguish just 5 groups very briefly. So we have Christian Arabs, and they make up overwhelming majority of the Christians. Here, between 2/3 and 3/4 of Christian Arabs are citizens of Israel. Then we have a relatively large number of expats like myself, including many priests and religious who live and work here. Then you have Christians who have immigrated to Israel and who have become citizens due to family or other links with Jews, particularly from the countries of former communist bloc. And the vast majority are Orthodox, but among them are Catholics as well. So for example, on Shabbat, we will have many Israeli groups who visit us, but Israeli by passport, all of them are Russian Orthodox, in fact. So it's not uncommon to have Orthodox Mass on Sunday, on a Saturday, because it's a day off, which creates really interesting dynamic as well. And often in our shop or when we sell tickets, the conversation starts in Hebrew and then we'll switch into Russian. So also there are also 10,000 of Christian foreign workers and refugees, and many are Catholics, including Filipinos, 40,000 in Israel today, South Sudanese, Eastern Rite Indians, and Maronite Lebanese. So quite a mosaic, as you can see. And there's also a small number of indigenous Israelis who believe in Jesus. And the biggest number would be Messianic Jews, 10,000, but there are also Catholics. So what is the context for Jewish Catholic relations here? Jewish Catholic relations here are sharply distinguished from the type of relations that exist in Europe, North America, Australia, and Oceania, where Jews and Catholics have been in a fruitful and passionate dialogue for the last 6 decades. This dialogue has been powered by 2 strong motors. One is the awakened sense of contrition that Catholics have sensed for the tragic fate of the Jews during periods when anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism dominated, culminating in the catastrophe of Shoah. And the other is the embrace of the biblical and Jewish heritage of the church at its center. The fact that Jesus and his disciples and the early church were part of a Jewish world that was given to us, that has given to us a rich shared heritage. So whereas both these factors do affect Catholic-Jewish relations here, the overwhelming contemporary reality of the political conflict between Palestinians and Israelis has a very important role in the relations between Catholics and Jews as well. At the moment, most of the official Jewish Catholic dialogue that goes on in Israel is between expats, expatriate Christians, and foreign-born Jews. Because there's this history already of a fruitful dialogue in other continents. So we bring this with us. We have this openness, and it's easier to cross the borders. Also, it is important to take note of a few points I'm going to bring up. First of them is that the Latin Patriarchate, under the leadership of Patriarch Michael Sabach in the year 2000, initiated a special commission for relations with the Jewish people, which has been meeting in the past years, focused particularly on Jewish Catholic dialogue within the particular context of the Holy Land. And this was a direct result of the Synod of the Catholic Churches in the Holy Land, which ended in year 2000 and called for this kind of contextual dialogue. So as you can see, this is a fairly new thing, only about 20 years that a Jewish Christian dialogue has been initiated here, taking into account all those local factors. Another important point is that Jewish Christian and Muslim religious leaders have been meeting and dialoguing within a framework that was initiated at Alexandria in Egypt, and that is focused on the conflict and the search for a religious response that would contribute to justice and peace. And here some of our sisters actually participated in the past in a dialogue where three main religions would meet. And that recently we had a call to renew this. So that both Muslims and Jews want to meet with Christians again and see what the shared points are. So there are sisters who are going to engage in that, we hope, soon. Also, there is an official dialogue between the Chief Rabbinate of Israel and the Holy See, which has needed to address at certain times the lived reality of a small Christian minority face to face with a dominant Jewish majority. Local Catholics and Jews do collaborate in different organizations promoting justice, human rights, peace, and dialogue. And this collaboration is often less theological or even religious and more social activist and even politically oriented. The fact that the majority of Catholics in Israel and Palestine are Arabs means that the ongoing conflict in the Middle East makes Catholic-Jewish dialogue difficult at times. Local Catholics who are Palestinian, whether living under Israeli occupation or being citizens of the State of Israel, tend to focus on justice and peace as an essential element of any dialogue. And Jewish Israelis who are interested in dialogue with Christians are sometimes unwilling to engage in a dialogue with which these political issues are the center. The result is that there are few forums of interreligious dialogue where local Christian Arabs participate, but this is also changing. Recently, I visited a parish in Nazareth. It's an Anglican Palestinian parish. And for the first time, the parish priest said, we're going to introduce liturgy in Hebrew here because the new generation speaks Hebrew, they're bilingual. And that's a huge revolution because it's until now, it was almost unheard of that someone would dare bring in some Hebrew into the local liturgy in Nazareth. So we can see that the times are changing. We can see that times are changing. Last Sunday, we had a Palestinian a group that came from Haifa, and also a mom and her daughter who are working for ONU. And they also met with the visiting Jews that we had this weekend. So, you know, there are those spaces that are possible, and, you know, we can sometimes facilitate and make an opening for. When Israeli Jews and indigenous Catholics do meet, a unique reality molds the dialogue. And like anywhere else where Jews and Catholics are talking, here Jews are the dominant and empowered majority within the society in which dialogue is happening. This fundamentally changes the dynamic in the dialogue. Thus, the local church does not reflect on this dialogue from the same starting point as its European and North American or Australian, Oceanian counterparts, strongly influenced by the history of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. Christians in Israel, Palestine, live as a minority face to face with the Jewish majority. And this is an absolutely unique historical situation. Nowhere else in the world do Christians experience directly Jewish sovereignty and power. For many of the Holy Land faithful, the Jew is often the first and foremost a policeman, a soldier, a settler. And this unique situation must inform a dialogue that takes place between Jews and Catholics here. The shared biblical heritage is a fundamental principle in the decades of the Jewish-Catholic dialogue. And one of the richest experiences in many places in Europe and elsewhere has been joint study of the text that Jews and Catholics share and the commentaries. And one other aspect of Jewish-Catholic relations here that is essential is that neither Jews nor Catholics can ignore the presence of Muslims and Islam in the reality. Islam is the dominant religion in the Middle East. And Muslims are the majority in all countries in the Middle East, except for Israel. The Christian Arab and Muslim Arab, whatever their religious differences might be, live in one society, speak one language, share one culture and experience one social political reality. Thus, dialogue with Muslims is a priority for the local church in a way that is not self-evident in other parts of the world. Relations between Jews and Catholics are molded also by the centuries of history in which Jews lived as a marginal and sometimes persecuted minority in various parts of Europe. The rise of the Jewish national movement at the end of 19th century strengthened the tendency to read the long and complex history of Jewish-Christian relations as monochromatic and uniquely as a tale of woe. So simplistically presented, Christians persecuted Jews always and everywhere. This was one essential argument to persuade Jews to immigrate to Palestine and later Israel. Understandings of history, religious ideology, and nationalism leave their mark on how many modern Israeli Jews talk about Christians and Christianity. And undoubtedly, this impacts very strongly on how Christians and Christianity are presented in the educational system. On the one hand, Christians in Israel are so marginal that they are almost invisible. Many Jewish Israelis have never consciously met a Christian Israeli or a Christian Palestinian, and some would not even know of their existence. Palestinians and Arabs in general are almost by definition Muslim. Furthermore, the ongoing conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has impacted the perception that today the Arab is a Muslim who is the enemy, rather than a Christian, and the Christian, assumed to be Westerner, is someone, in some cases, even an ardent friend. So when they think Christian, surely it's the Westerner, it's the pilgrim that comes. But to imagine that, you know, there could be a Palestinian Christian is it's something more difficult. So that's important to remember as well. And we're working on that. We're trying to build the bridges there as well. The presence of Islam and Muslims within the context of relations between Catholics and Jews is too often negatively perceived as well within much of the present discourse on Jewish-Catholic relations. Middle Eastern Catholics are often perceived as not free to develop the dialogue with Jews because of the fear that this will be seen as breaking ranks with Muslims in the conflict over the question of Palestine. On the other hand, some see relations between Jews and Middle Eastern Christians in terms of separating Christians from the rest of the Arab people and even creating a common front against Muslims. What is still in its infancy is an overall understanding of how these two essential relationships with Jews and with Muslims can be coherently presented so that the local church, local Catholics can be both faithful to the Jewish roots of the church and participate in the rich dialogue with the Jewish people, as well as engaged in an absolutely essential dialogue with Muslims, with whom Arab Catholics share a world, a history, and identity. So that's, as you see it, it's a very complex and delicate issue. Deep fissures have marked the church as various often opposing tendencies emerge with regard to dialogue with Jewish people, and questions of justice and peace in Israel and Palestine come to the forefront. So one tendency, strong in Europe and North America, and perhaps in Australia and your region, was composed of the groups that saw with deep shame the role Catholics had played in promoting a teaching of contempt for the Jewish people through the ages. And this group is determined to push forward the dialogue with the Jewish people so that Catholics and Jews can enter a new age of reconciliation and collaboration. Often the first group has been supported by those in the church who study and teach the Bible. The increasing awareness of the Bible, both Old and New Testaments, is incomprehensible without profound awareness of Judaism. The history of the Jewish people and the Hebrew language has strengthened the feeling that we have much in common with the Jewish people and that we have much to learn from them. Today, it is not unusual for Catholic pastors, educators, and lay leaders to travel to the land of the Bible and reading the biblical text there, become aware of the vitality and beauty of the Jewish tradition and those who practice it in Israel today. In this worldview, Israelis are a courageous part of the Jewish people struggling to be reborn after the traumatic and dramatic sufferings of the past. From this perspective, the Palestinians are barely on the radar screen sometimes, and that has to be recognized. So this group of people will be like, yeah, the mean Palestinians, they're sending the bombs, basically. Let's focus on reconciliation, healing, and the Bible. But however, along this tendency, another has emerged. Those Catholics committed to the work of justice and peace, determined to struggle against oppression and discrimination, have taken Palestinians to their hearts. They see the Palestinians as a people struggling for the freedom, and in some cases, the struggle has become paradigmatic for understanding the struggles of so many marginalized and dispossessed peoples and groups in contemporary society. In this worldview, the Israelis are powerful, army-oriented and oppressive majority who dominate the last of the third world's nations as yet to achieve national independence through a cruel machinery of occupation. The Holy Father's 2009 visit to Israel, Palestine illustrated to the Church that these two tendencies not only can, but must be held together without confusion. The Church is obliged to continue the road of dialogue and reconciliation with the Jewish people, and the Church is equally obliged to speak out for justice for Palestinians. So commitment to dialogue with the Jewish people cannot be synonymous just with the support for the state of Israel. It also needs to be synonymous with fighting for the human rights. Also, from a different point, just so that you know, today in Israel, there is a certain openness to Christianity as such, putting aside some of the more negative attitudes from during the long centuries of traumatic history. This is particularly evident in the way Christianity is presented in history textbooks used in secular Israeli schools, where Jesus, Paul, and the early church are discussed with objectivity and even respect. This is not true of textbooks used in religious schools, though, and might not be true of the oral discourse in the classroom. But there is a palpable change as Israelis see themselves less as victims and more as sovereign makers of history. In a survey of attitudes among the adult Jewish population in Israel regarding Christianity, Christians, and the Christian presence in Israel, conducted by Dr. Amon Ramon for the Jerusalem Institute for Israel Studies, differentiates between secular and religious Jewish Israelis. So according to this survey, for example, 80% of secular Jews believe they are allowed to enter churches, whereas 83% of the religious Jews believe visiting churches is forbidden. 78% of religious Jews believe Christianity is idol worship, while 66% of secular Jews disagree. So you can see that there's also an interesting dynamic there. Hamutal Ben Yosef, a Jewish Israeli professor of literature, points out the following. The state of Israel, though full of various tensions, enables a Jew to become interested in Christianity without ever experiencing anti-Semitism and without living in the midst of Christians. This is a completely new experience for the Jew. In a country where the visible manifestations of Christianity have a limited presence, there is no urgent need for Jewish Christians to dialogue, nor for the rehabilitation of Judaism in the eyes of Christians. The growing interest in Christianity must therefore be explained by intellectual curiosity and emotional attraction almost free from the burden of victim psychology, leaving blame and guilt to be cured through time. Unquote. Israeli society is in the process of transformation with regard to Christianity and Christians. Large segments of Jewish society are more open than ever before to rethink attitudes toward Christianity and Christians. So that's very interesting. And also, we need to take into consideration one last point. There's a new reality in Israel and throughout the Middle East, and that is the existence of large groups of non-Arab Catholics, mostly newcomers to the Middle East. In Israel, there are today not only Catholics of Jewish origin who, together with committed Catholics of non-Jewish origin, have founded Hebrew-speaking communities in the country, but also tens of thousands of Catholic immigrants, foreign workers, and refugees whose children are already integrated into the Israeli Jewish school system. It is not uncommon today to hear Russian, Ukrainian, Filipino, Indian, Colombian, and Lebanese children communicating fluently in Hebrew. They are living a dialogue with the Jewish people that is yet unconscious and largely unrecognized. The Catholic foreign workers and refugees, being poor and mostly non-European, can and do witness to their faith in a simple and direct way that has already impacted positively Jewish perceptions of Christianity. These groups constitute an enormous challenge for our churches of the Middle East in general, and also for the Church of Israel. It has become more necessary than ever to promote the small Hebrew-speaking church than together with its much older Arabic-speaking sister can together bear witness to the risen Lord. However, the interesting theological perspective is to have these populations living as the heart of majority Israeli Jewish society formulate their own Jewish Catholic dialogue based on the unique and new experience of a sovereign, empowered, and self-confident Jewish population as a partner in the dialogue. So here are some of the perspectives. As you see, it's very rich, it's very complex. And so the community here is constantly navigating between the pilgrims because you want to welcome the pilgrims here. We have the holy site, as you know, and the holy site is visited by the three religions. And some of you probably have visited Emmaus Nicopolis, where we are situated. Before COVID, we would have up to 5 or 7 masses a day on the site. And it's not one of the major sites. They say this is like you go here, you arrive to Emmaus Nicopolis when you arrive, or just before you leave with the grace of resurrection. And as there are 2 other Emmaus sites that are believed to be Emmaus, you know, those pilgrims are kind of spread over. Some go to Abu Ghosh, and there's another Arab-speaking Emmaus in the territories called Kubayba. So we would not receive so many pilgrims as the Holy Sepulchre, but we would still receive a large number of pilgrims. And the proof being, you know, so many masses. But what is really interesting is that, as I said before, we have all those Russian Jews who are in fact Orthodox. So also we have those Orthodox masses happening, divine liturgy happening regularly on the site. And then we have Messianic Jews who came to visit us, and the Protestants who also come to celebrate. So that creates a very interesting ecumenical dialogue and possibilities, obviously, in encounter. Then also we have, during COVID, it is very striking. We have lots of Israeli groups coming through because they cannot go outside of Europe, or to America. So, you know, they start visiting the Christian places because it's as if we were in Europe or somewhere else. And very often we're called to come and speak to those groups, explain what Christianity is all about because they know nothing. Or it could be the first time they ever meet a consecrated person. Again, because there are so many separations in Israel, people live like as if in conclaves. So you could have a whole city or part of the city that is entirely Christian, You could have an entire city that is Muslim, and then another city or a quarter or a village that's only Jewish, and those people will never cross boundaries to see one another. You cross those boundaries in the supermarkets, for example. Yesterday I went shopping, and a young boy came up to me and said, with huge astonishment, "So you are a nun? Wow, you're a nun? Where do you live?" I said, "I just live, 10 minutes away from here." And it was like such a huge revelation, as if he saw a movie star or something. So it's important to bear this witness. And again, as I quoted in this from the paper, what is interesting and beautiful is because that there's no history of persecution of Israelis here by Christians. They have this curiosity. This boy came up to me with total amazement and, "Tell me who you are," So the community, because community promotes this dialogue, I think we have a very unique approach. Many Christian communities here are immediately perceived as, you're Christian, you're a Christian community, you run a holy site, therefore you minister only to the Palestinian side of the church. And Beatitudes are both and. As I mentioned, those 2 points that the Pope asked us to work on in his speech in 2009, he said you have to do both. You have to talk about the Jewish roots of Christianity, of the biblical heritage, reparation of all those horrific things that happened in the history, but also you have to work for the justice. And so I find that the community is finding its way. It's one of the few communities here that speak where members speak Hebrew. Usually everyone speaks Arabic. So we have lots of Israeli groups coming to our place because they know that they will have someone explain to them the Christianity in Hebrew or in English. And that there will be people who will understand their mentality, who will be able to address their issues, understand the questions. And at the same time, we engage with the help for the Palestinian people. So we have several discrete projects going on. So mostly just driving through the border and bringing what is necessary to some families in need, and also trying to find some sponsors for the families who are struggling and cannot provide for the education of their children. So there are some people, for example, who work in the patriarchate in Jerusalem, so they work for high offices in the Catholic Church, yet they cannot afford to pay fully for the education of their children sometimes. And the community sometimes can find sponsors for their children and other families like that. So we can, as I said, we can do a bit of both and. There are two sisters on the site who write icons as well. So there's this openness towards the ecumenical dialogue through writing icons with the Orthodox world. So we have a workshop for writing icons on the site as well. And that provides a really nice platform as well for the contacts with the Orthodox. And one of the sisters actually goes to Bethlehem every Wednesday for a whole day to work there. So again, a little link with the Palestinian world. So I'm not sure if at this point you have any questions. Also, maybe I can tell you about the situation with COVID. Obviously, you know it very well because both of our countries have been locked. So to say, it's not only the lockdown, but we have been locked out, so to say. And in Israel, we're gradually opening. So when I arrived in May, the holy sites were all closed still. Few and then also that there was more opening, more more opening for groups since mid-September. So we had a bit of a breather. We could see, finally, we could see some people coming through. We would have maybe 2 masses a week. Recently, we got to 1 mass a day. We had a week when we had 6 masses, which is incredible. And as you know, the new strain has arrived, and it's all back to the standstill. Immediately, what happened on Sunday, we heard the new announcement that no foreigners are allowed into Israel for the next 2 weeks, but we all know what it means. That 2 weeks will probably be prolonged more for a longer time. So this is an ongoing problem here with the total isolation. As I said, that's why we are doing this appeal, because we still need to pay our bills and keep the holy site open, keep the holy site going, and even do some repairs. So hence we're providing you some formation time, maybe time of question answers, and just speaking about the reality we have here. So maybe I will leave you some time. I'll give you some time for to ask me some questions. Anything you wish. I'll try to do my best.
Thank you, Sister. I hope everyone can hear me. We are going to ask people to put their questions into the chat, and then as they come up, Sister, you might be able to answer them as we go. But we have the first question from Robert.
What's my question?
I don't know. I think one, so you for a question.
Oh,
you go.
Oh, by the way, I think there's another way they can do it. They can put their hand up somehow. If people don't have a hand up,
and we can
unmute
unmute
the person with the hand.
But we can change the view. Hang on.
If they put their hand up, I think we can.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Can sisters see them if they put their?
So sisters is controlled by Sister. So yeah.
You know, their hand isn't their hand, but there's a thing on here which is a hand up.
You might explain it to everyone.
I don't know how to do it. Sister, you might know it's all modern. But somewhere on here, there's a little thing that's like putting your hand up, isn't it? Do you know how to do it?
It's in the section more. You have to, you tap on the screen once and you see to your right more. You tap on it and there is raise hand. Could you tell us about the site where you live? Are you close to the monastery of Latrun? Is the first question. Let me see. Could you tell us about the monastery of Latrun and the Neve Shalom site? Yes, so our site is about 24 kilometers, 25 kilometers from Jerusalem. And what is interesting about this site, because we're always in a bit, you know, everyone is trying to sell their Emmaus since there are 3. This site has most archaeological evidence, we could say. There is a Byzantine basilica from the 4th century. There are graves from the time of Jesus around the basilica. We also found in some of those graves remains of the first bishops of the Holy Land. There's a mosaic that was recovered saying the bishop's house, that is written in Greek and is going back to the 1st centuries. We have the accounts of the first Christian pilgrims going through Israel, mentioning Emmaus Nicopolis. So this site has all those findings. We also found the bodies of crusaders when they came. We knew they were crusaders because you have a mummified body. They would cut their heart and send them back to France or wherever they were from. And so we found those mummies without hearts. So we knew they were crusaders. They thought that this is a holy site. But there was a confusion in the Bible. The first scribes, the first manuscripts mention the longer distance between Jerusalem and Emmaus. And to some scribes, it seemed too long, so they shortened it. And so when the Crusaders came, they were confused. Where is the holy site? We don't know. Therefore, we renew the the basilica, the Byzantine basilica, because it seems it's an important site with all those graves and inscriptions about bishops. But we're also going to build what is called today Abu Ghosh Crusaders Chapel, because you know, if you feel that Emmaus was closer, then maybe this is it. So during the Crusader time, there were 2 holy sites operating to make sure that one of them is right, we could say. But we often do in the Easter like a pilgrimage. We go to Jerusalem and back in a day to show that it's possible to have a return trip to Jerusalem and back. It takes about 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours, you know, depends how fast you walk, 4 hours. Yes, we're close to Latrun. So in fact, there's 3 religious communities living here on the hill, we like to say. There are Cistercian brothers, and also there's an ecumenical community called Bruderschaft. And that community is taking people from different denominations, mostly Protestants, and they minister to Messianic Jews. So Bruderschaft is ministering to the Messianic Jews. They provide them space for conferences and contact with other Christians. And the Cistercians provide a really nice opening as well to secular Israelis. And also they host a Jewish Russian community every Saturday night. So that's where we are. The other community was mostly concerned with the interreligious dialogue, and our sisters would go and participate in it. In the past, we were about less active there, and COVID made it more difficult. Another question is, the community is famous for celebrating Shabbat in the Christian way. Can you tell us about how Israeli Jews react and resonate with this? Yes, it's a very good question. So far, we haven't had negative reactions. So far, what we had, actually, the community a few years ago changed the blessing. When we light the candles, the community now says, with the people, together with the people of Israel. We receive the grace together with the people of Israel. And I saw personally Jewish friends cry when they hear that we say this particular blessing, that we do not do as if you know, we're taking over, that it's done with. And so the change of those blessings has been very fruitful. And some of them, we recently had a friend who actually came for the weekend, and she's an observant Jew. And she said, I can do it because, you know, I know you guys know what's kosher, what's non-kosher. When Kabbalat Shabbat comes, I know I can say my prayers, you know, and I can simply pray with you. And the extra prayers we would add don't seem to bother them. We would do a weekly Torah commentary. And so they're quite touched that we actually provide an opportunity for what they call Dvach Torah. So the table talk about the Torah portion of the week. So that experience has been actually very positive. And then in turn, when they come, we are invited often to their places. And we even had guides who said, can we bring an Israeli group for Kabbalat Shabbat, which we sometimes cannot provide for because our place is small. But sometimes, for example, with the kibbutz next door, we meet about twice or 3 times a year for a shared Shabbat or a feast day experience. And for example, this week we have Hanukkah, so the festival of lights, the consecration of the temple, and they're coming at the end of Shabbat on this Saturday. So they come on Motzei Shabbat, and they will light the candles together with us. They will participate in Vespers, and we will do some Israeli Jewish dancing together. So there are those opportunities here as well. And there's another question I saw. Are there any particular intentional Christian communities, like families not celibate persons in Israel's? Are there any particular? Could you reform me?
Can you reformulate?
So who's good? Is Honey?
Unmute her.
Honey, can you?
Yes, I can explain. What I'm talking about is if there's like.
It's a question about international.
Yes, intentional communities. This is like in Egypt, some villages, it happens that people find themselves in a community, but intentional community is when people decide to live together, a common purpose, like the early church. I was wondering if there are any particular Christian intentional communities in Israel that live together.
That would probably be more true of Messianic Jews, because in here, what you have religious villages called yeshuv, so settlements or just villages. And we've noticed that the same thing happens here and there for Messianic Jews, where they decide we want to keep Shabbat together, but we want to keep also we want to have Jesus with us, so to say. And so there are several villages, yeshuvim, of this type, where they spontaneously decided to create this sort of community. As for other denominations, I think a bit less. What you could see perhaps in some settlements, that you have a monastery, and then people gravitate a bit like in a leaf field. You have a monastery, and then people gravitate around a monastery, and you have your circle of friends, support you. It's a mutual thing. But I think those spontaneous communities are more visible with the Messianic Jews. But also the state provides those possibilities for the Jews to create those kinds of villages, observant villages. And so sometimes even you could go to a village like that, and you think it's a normal Orthodox or traditional village, but in fact they're all Messianic inside. Do you have any other questions? Can you tell us about some of the most urgent needs of the community and some of your projects? The urgent need is actually basically to survive, because what happened was with the influx of the pilgrims, the community here managed to set aside money that was almost good to keep this place alive for a year. And then obviously there were no pilgrims. And so the immediate need is even to think of paying the bills, the basic bills to rent the site. So this is quite important. And then there are two other major projects, because we're sharing the site with the Carmelite sisters from Bethlehem. So the Basilica belongs actually to the sisters, Carmelite sisters from Bethlehem, but there are very few of them. And also they're also in the in the territories, and Bethlehem had even fewer pilgrims than us. So we have some repairs that need to be done on the property at the Basilica, or even at the front gate that is we are afraid that might fall. And so yes, we're looking for some fundraising in that area as well. At the moment, we're in a synod situation. So for those repairs, we actually addressed the diocese, and we said, look, this is a common heritage, everyone. We can call out to people in the world, but this is also in your diocese. Try to give us some, contacts for this particular project. So we're hoping that in the third stage of the synod that's happening right now in the church, we'll be able to launch more fundraising also via the local church. But we're also doing appeals to everyone else, simply because those sisters in Bethlehem are too poor right now to be able to maintain the site. And there was another question: how are your relations with the Messianic Jews? It depends. There are some denominations that are anti-Catholic, anti-Orthodox, anti-anything that's a traditional church, because they're still stuck in that mantra of the past. The Christians are bad, therefore they're persecutors. Even if we have accepted Jesus, they're still enemy. They could come and get us. They could betray us. So there are some strains of Messianic Jews that have this attitude. But fortunately, more and more, this is changing. And recently, a few years ago, there was created an international body called Yahad B'Yeshua, which translates as Together in Jesus. And it gathers Jews from all over the world, Messianics and traditional churches together. So Jewish members of those denominations who believe in Jesus. And this is first time in history where Messianics agreed to cooperate with Catholics, Baptists, and Orthodox Christians, recognizing them as, in this organization as their Jewish brothers. And they said something has to be done about breaching those differences, those animosities in the past. But it's a very new thing still in the world. It has only, I think, 3-4 years. It was born 3-4 years ago, but it's gaining members every month. So we could see some interesting work and perspective happening.
So there's one other question from Catherine Black there, sister. Does Saint Stein's life assist you in a practical way?
Okay, yes. Does Edith Stein's life assist you in a particular way? Yes, it does. It's an interesting question because I discovered a few years ago, actually, thanks to my stay in New Zealand, and not thanks to my stay in New Zealand, but I discovered some years ago that I had myself Jewish heritage, both of my parents, my mother and my father. And it was, my grandma would always say, you cannot be both Jewish and Catholic. That's what her rabbi said. Even though though my father grew up in a Jewish environment, a Jewish quarter, with his sister and my grandparents, they would still say, we cannot say we're Jewish because we're Christians, because there was this clear-cut division. You were excluded, even though they managed to remain respected, to be respected. So when I found out about that heritage, and I heard my grandma saying, you cannot do both, I kind of gave up on this. And then I came to New Zealand, and you guys receive Hebrew Catholic. I'm not sure if you still receive this little thing, but I started reading it and I thought, wow, actually both are possible. Both are possible. We can be Jewish, we can have a Jewish Catholic heritage and be part of the church. And this is when, for me personally, Edith Stein started playing an enormous role as well in my personal and prayer life, knowing if it's possible for her, it's possible for me, and everyone has to find their own way with this. There's no formula. We had a visit from a Jewish, a Hebrew Catholic girl who came from Italy, and she said, what's your formula? And I said to her, you have to find your own. You have to see how you navigate this. Edith Stein found it in writing, and educating people in intellectual work. For me, it was more, it's the Bible study, learning about the common heritage, and also educating people about it, fighting anti-Semitism. But every person has to find their own way. But it's true that for me, Edith Stein is definitely a source of inspiration. And someone says who never gave up, neither on Christ nor on her Jewish heritage until the end. And it's a very original way, but not an impossible way. And if she can do it, anyone else can.
So if there are any other questions, if you could just enter them into the chat now. Just while we wait, I'm just going to try sharing the screen here with you, because
yes,
there's a very important wee detail here. Can you see that on your screens? Sister, can you see these details now? Or
yes, please make your tax-deductible donation into the following account.
hang on. That's the one. Whoops, yep. I'll back to it if I can. Sorry.
It's on the screen.
It's on the screen?
And there's also a really nice comment. We're going through the Bible in a year podcast, and it is amazing learning the Old Testament and the links. It is very true. And John Paul II was saying that, we should read the Bible with Jewish commentaries, with our elder brothers in faith, because they will help us to understand who Jesus was, who is. Just to give you an example, when we hear in the Magnificat, the Holy Spirit will overshadow you. So the shadow is Tzelem, something like that in Hebrew, right? And in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, I think there is when Moses receives the instructions to start building the Mishkan, the tent of the meeting. He calls on a man called Betzalel. Betzalel means the shadow of God. So he's the one constructing the temple, so to say, the Betzalel, the helper of Moses. But so when a Jewish Catholic or a Messianic Jew hears the words of Magnificat, and they hear the Holy Spirit will overshadow you, they know immediately that the one who's coming, the Messiah, is going to be the one constructing the so to say, the new temple, not replacing anyone, but the new temple is the one that will allow for Jews and non-Jews, the nations and the Jews worship together without any inner court division. Everyone will be able to come into this temple, and we're forming this temple today, the body of Christ, obviously. So, you know, those links are very important, and there are many examples like that we could give you concerning the links between the Old and the New Testament, and it's extremely important to delve into them because they can really enrich your prayer life.
Yeah.
So I would definitely encourage you to go in that direction.
Okay. So do we have any other questions there?
Mm-hmm. You can't have one without the other. Yes, both.
Okay. Any other questions from people here? Because I know you haven't had a chance to type anything. So Stuart says, what's your top priority, sister?
My top priority. There are different priorities here, actually. What I like with community life, that many things change. You have a routine, but you also have your stable points. So here, my stable points is actually the community asked me to complete a degree in theology, so I could be more involved with the Jewish-Christian dialogue. So I'm in the 4th year right now, but also yes, Jewish-Christian dialogue. So meeting providing opportunities for outings or meeting Jewish friends who want to meet us, who have those questions about Christianity, or taking Christians into the Jewish area, Jewish zones. So it's definitely something that I carry about a lot, and the community has given me the freedom to do it, apart from obviously being on the site with the pilgrims and doing the kitchen and the cleaning as everyone else in our homes. But definitely these are my priorities for sure.
What's your question?
Well, I was really thinking about the practical.
Yeah, that's what
What
I
if
thought.
they,
So she
for her
said
number
she-
one,
yeah.
Sorry about that. Sorry, could you just rephrase that?
so I was really coming from the angle of what from here in New Zealand, the bottom or the very top, so where you live in. What is the most practical thing we can do that's really relevant help? Relevant help. So I think she's crying out for help. And it'd be nice to know what really makes a difference. As easiest and fastest.
Money.
So I'm not sure if you heard that, sister. So Stuart's saying, what can we do here in New Zealand in a very practical way to help you and your community and your work over there?
Right. I mean, there are 2 ways, I think. Well, 3 ways, of course. The first one, please pray that we can continue our mission, and that we can maybe even collaborate with New Zealand in one way or another when the borders are open, that, you know, we could have some links because Israel is more of an English speaking foundation. Most of our foundations are French speaking, and here there is this possibility, there's this opening for the English speaking world. So that would be nice to continue to develop that friendship. And also maybe even speak about this place to your friends, you know, when the borders are open, when you go on a pilgrimage, tell your guides about Emmaus Nicopolis, please go to this place. Please order a visit, ask a brother or sister to come and speak to you, give you a tour of the place, or tell you about the mission of this place. So you can tell other parishes about Emmaus Nicopolis. And obviously the financial help is very, very welcome, because right now we're all in dire needs. And I've been told recently that, you know, it's not only Beatitudes, it's many holy sites, because what happened was that we had no subventions from the government. There was a project, a Jewish project actually, that went to the president's office to have those Catholic communities, you know, subsidized a little bit. But we had the change of the president. The old president left, and with him, the office was closed, and that project was closed. And also, even the Jews themselves, like the guides, in over the last 2 years, they only received one subvention from the government, and at the very, very beginning of COVID. So, you know, it's definitely not an easy period for us, especially with those borders closing again, as announced a few days ago. And I think you know this for yourselves, being isolated and having all those rules imposed on you because of COVID. So it's very frustrating. And then also we're not able to minister to people, and also we're not able to work basically. So this is a big challenge today for sure. So prayer, tell us other people about it, about this place, and if possible, make some donations. Yes. And pastor, sister, you know, all the sisters in the leaf fields, you know, once the borders are open, what can we do? What, you know, how can we maybe, I don't know, have more sessions, or come here for a little retreat? I don't know, something.
Yes, well, I feel it's like a little bit of a historical moment making contact in this way with you. So I think that we definitely try and continue our communication, and do a retreat between New Zealand and Israel with the Beatitudes. So let's talk more about that, sister, and definitely you are in our prayers, and also for those of us who have the means, I just encourage you one more time to have a look at those details there in the comment. I've put the bank account details there.
Also, there is a possibility of coming as a volunteer from 2 weeks to up to 3 months, because the visas allow you to go into the country for 3 months. So there is a possibility as well of serving in a holy site. So you can see the country, but you can also be at the service of the holy site. That's another very concrete way, when it's possible, when the borders open, of course.
So we have one more question from Jen. Jen, if you want to just repeat that in a loud voice.
Have you also appealed to the house in Denver? I mean, like the Americans?
Yes, we are appealing them, and we have Father Anthony who's going around, but we have a little concurrence problem, because he's got a young people's program, and of course he's going to America, and he's telling about Emmaus Nicopolis, but then he wants the money, so to say, for Beatitudes missions. But he did go around, and he got us some money. Another project we have for America, one of the sisters is going to assist that American brother in January. She's going to go and do campus reach out with him in January. And we have asked that she would probably go and do a specific appeal for the Beatitudes for Emmaus Nicopolis in some of the parishes. I hope to go to Dallas. I've been called to go to Dallas for this Yahad Yeshua conference, for the One in Jesus conference, to represent the community of the Beatitudes. And my ticket has already been paid for. So I will probably take an opportunity as well to visit maybe 2-3 parishes there and make a Emmaus appeal when I'm there in June, at the end of June.
Okay, I'm just changing the camera view there so that you can see all of us, Sister, and
Wow.
I invite everyone just to show their appreciation for your amazing talk.
Thank you.
Well,
I'd like to give the final word to Sister Therese. She's here somewhere. Where are you, Sister? There you are.
I think another way to help this Zoom conference has been recorded, and it's going to be placed on our.
So we will put that up on our Facebook pages and on our websites for people to watch again and again. So
emails,
please, please keep an eye on that. We'll send an email out with the links for you.
Yes, that's an easy way to just spread it around, and a way of helping is to encourage people to help the community financially. If you could just spread the word around through this teaching, because I think it's worth hearing this teaching and getting to know that reality of Israel a bit better for us here in New Zealand, to understand what it is like in Israel.
Very good. Well, thank you all again for coming. I'm just going to see if I can unmute you all, and you can just make a bit of noise. How do I do that, Robert?
Thank you so much.
Here it is. 1, 2, 3. There we are. Unmute everybody.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
thank you, sister.
Bye-bye.
God
Thank
bless.
you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you.
Thanks, sister. Hi, Michael.
Thank you.
I'll
Thank
see
you.
you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mum.
Gorgeous baby.
Very well.
Right, and we finished.
Oh, cute, cute. How old is she?
And tea and 2 months.
Nice. And name?
Joseph.
Of course.
Oh, perfect. Good job. Well done. God bless. Bye.
God bless. Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Bye.
Bye, Deborah.
Bye, Deborah.
Hi, Deborah.
Farewell.
Bye, Namir.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye, Carol.
Bye. Bye-bye.
How do I turn this off? How do I turn it off? When's Briar coming to the South Island, Olga?
Is Brian back with you?
They're in the MIQ at the moment.
Oh, wow.
Tell them to
Excellent.
come down with her. Have a
They'll
nice.
escape on Thursday.
Oh, lovely. That's awesome.
Okay, good
See
night.
you, see you in the soup. Bye.
Bye.
I'm leaving.
See you later.